Hello, and welcome to another episode of Game, Develop, Repeat, the podcast where we talk about a game that I enjoy, what makes it special, and what we as game developers can learn from it. I'm your host, Chris, a music educator turned indie game developer, and today's episode is all about Cook, Serve, Delicious 3. But before we get to it, I have an announcement. The demo for my first game, Soot, that's S-U-T, is now publicly available. You can check it out on itch.io, and there's going to be a link in the show notes. This game, I've been working on it for months now. It is my first real game, other than like just little small things that you do to experiment around, right? It is a small, cute pixel art 2D platformer where you play a ball of soot. It's got a wall sticking mechanic that I really have been enjoying, and it's got a couple different ways to jump. There's like this leap animation that I'm so I'm so proud of it to a degree that is like not reasonable for like the amount of effort I put in. It's like one of the first animations that I felt really happy about. So it's got this great jump animation that I'm happy with. You've got a basic attack. It's got kind of a minimalistic design philosophy. It's mostly going to be driven in the full version. It's mostly going to be driven by the level design more than anything else. I'm sharing it with you because I'm hoping to get some feedback, and I'm excited to see what other people are going to think of it. Now, it is only on Windows at the moment. I was trying to get it to work on Mac, but I don't have access to a Mac, so I can't really do much about that at the moment. I'm doing some tests with some friends, and hopefully it'll be working soon, but it may not. I've got to keep that possibility in mind. Hey, this is Chris from the future, and the tests with my friends worked out. The Mac edition is now working. It's fully functional, so you should be able to play if you are a Mac user. Back to the episode. Thank you. But anyway, if you happen to send me feedback, your feedback will teach me more about game design than even doing this podcast will do, because it's a direct experience, and that is what I'm going for here. That is why I'm making this whole game. I'm trying to get direct experiences with game development. I'm trying to get as deep in the weeds as I possibly can so I can learn as much as I can as quickly as I can. And if you're trying to learn game development, I recommend doing the same thing. Get in the weeds, get in there, make stuff, get after it. All right. Having said all of that, let's get to why we're all actually here. In this episode, we're going to be discussing, like I already said, Cook, Serve, Delicious 3. We're going to be talking about enjoyable stress, cheerful post-apocalyptic world building, customizable difficulty, and everyone's favorite, perfectionism. Let's get to it. Cook Serve Delicious 3 is a game that I love. I love this whole trilogy. We're going to try to stay focused on the third game, but man, do I love these games. Just a quick, I guess, synopsis of the gameplay and the sort of aesthetic of the game for those of you who are not familiar. The Cook Serve Delicious series it's kind of a cooking typing game, so it's all about making recipes and managing timing and managing a restaurant, making your customers happy. When I say managing a restaurant, I really mean from a chef's perspective. What you were doing is you were managing the menu, and you are cooking the food quick enough, and you're just making sure that you are not making a menu that is so out of whack that you can't possibly provide for all your customers. And you are also making sure that none of the food gets burned and that everything gets out in time and all that stuff. This is a boots on the ground situation as a cook. You are making all the food, and you are also responsible for the menu. The stress that results from this is extremely intense. For some reason, when I'm playing this game, I feel like I am both being yelled at by Gordon Ramsay and I am Gordon Ramsay. It is a lot, and I love it. It's so beautiful, and the food looks great. It makes me curious about all these different foods too. Cook Serve Delicious 3 has all these foods that I've never heard of. It's just got like, I mean, maybe that's a me problem, but it's got so many interesting foods from so many different cultures, and like it makes a point to give you goofy versions of the backstories of a lot of these foods. Like sometimes it'll just make stuff up. It'll make up lore about different restaurants, and it'll be stuff that's like clearly a parody and a joke, and there's little puns and things like that. As far as the actual feeling of the game, so stress is a big part, like I mentioned, excuse me, the whole Gordon Ramsay kind of vibe. um but at the same time there's a cheerfulness throughout the game, and then as far as the actual gameplay loop, you can sort of adjust your difficulty. Now you're gonna end up customizing it to be pretty intense most of the time. There is a Zen mode in the game if you're not a high stress player. I don't know what it is with me, but I like a little bit of stress. It's something about that war strategy vibe. It's something about those Warcraft 3 days. The stress is buried deep inside of me, and I love a game that makes me stressed out. And that, that might not be good for me, but I do love it. Anyway, the the world of Cook Serve Delicious 3 is post-apocalyptic. This game was kind of billed as a post-apocalyptic cooking simulator in a way. So you are driving a food truck across the United States. You're going from state to state, and you get some lore as you are traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast, and learn a bit about what has happened. And I mean, not like very specifically, but you get good little like witty bits of backstory and things that just make you curious about the world. And this is kind of a tradition that carries over from the previous games. They're always putting odd things in the backstory, in your emails, in like items that you receive, that sort of thing. They're always putting just enough for you to be like, what kind of world am I living in? This place is weird, but it's always just weird enough to be relatable. There's just so much parody going on in this game. They're making fun of so many things, um, in such a lighthearted way, and it really is lovely. As far as the perfectionism stuff goes, this game encourages perfectionism, but I enjoy it. I think there's something about the way that the gameplay loop makes you want the gold star, the gold trophy, right? The perfect day. It makes you want it, but it doesn't, for me, it doesn't make me like, how do I put this? It does absolutely make me angry when I don't get the gold star. When I make that one mistake by accidentally putting mustard on a hot dog, and when they wanted a dry hot dog, which is like, you monster. But no offense to people who like dry hot dogs, but you're sorry, I'm not gonna be that mean. Um but anyway, I see, I'm having like flashbacks to playing this game and accidentally putting mustard on a hot dog and ruining my gold day, and then now I have a silver day because I made one mistake. It punishes you heavily, and I love that. But I love that feeling, I guess, is what I'm saying. It makes you angry about that one mistake, and then you go back and you go, okay, well, now I got to get it right. Like it's all about like this crazy skill development and memorization thing. This is a game that you should sleep on. That's the other thing. This is not sleep on as in not play, but sleep on as in you should play it some, sleep, play it some the next day, sleep. Like it is a skill development game, and your brain needs time to process what it has been doing on the game. um there's a lot of like muscle memory stuff, but then there are times that your muscle memory leads you astray, and those are the most frustrating moments in the game, when you're trying to hit the button for carrot and you hit the wrong button for carrot. You like think it's one letter, but it's another. And I can't remember the specific examples of this because I ended up at this point where I started picking foods that did not have the muscle memory overlap issue. Um, The customizable difficulty is nice, so you can choose your own recipes, right? You select your own foods that you want to do, and then depending on how good you get at those recipes, it changes the difficulty for you. And depending on what recipes you line up with each other, you can really put your menu in sync. You can really think through what is going to be in your menu and make sure that it is easy enough to prepare, that it's not one of these like nightmare menus where everything takes like forever to type out and then you can just never get to all your customers in time. Which does happen. Sometimes you have to serve nothing but hamburgers, and oh my god, serving nothing but hamburgers. That is a detail with Cook Serve Delicious 3 that I particularly enjoy. Not the hamburgers, but the times that it forces you to learn a recipe. So you can be coasting. You can be like, I'm good. I don't need to make anything other than lasagna for the rest of my days playing this game. And then it's like, hey, this level, you can only make foods that came from the barbecue restaurants or something, right? Or you can only make foods that would be at your neighborhood cookout, or you can only make desserts for this particular stop. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing that now. So you have to learn all these different foods. It's good. It's a good it's a good game. One more cool aesthetic thing. So you're driving this food truck across this I'm having trouble talking today. You're driving this food truck across this post-apocalyptic wasteland that is the United States, and you have two assistants. They are both robots. One of them is a driver and one of them is a gunner. There are times that other food trucks will attack you because it's highly competitive, this food truck business. And the lore around that is fun. All of the world building around that, the art around that is fun. The way that it feels is very like impactful. It's nice. I'm a fan of the absurdity of it. It really goes a bit over the top at times. Um, the the chef, your main character, just kind of seems like this guy he's just like tired. And it's so, on some level, it's so relatable to play this like tired chef who's just like trying to be perfect for every recipe, right? Like I get a lot of enjoyment out of that level of like character building, which is, it's very mild. The chef doesn't like have a voice, at least as far as I got in the game. I have not beaten this one because it's a big old game, and while I do absolutely love it, I have played a lot of the first two games, and while I intended to beat it at some point, I've not gotten around to it. And in all honesty, I may not get around to it, but I still love the game so much, and I do think that it is the peak of the Cook Serve Delicious trilogy. Now, I am going to mention very quickly the most recent Cook Serve Delicious game, which has recently released into early access. I played a demo of this game a few months ago. They had posted it up for like a week or so. I don't know exactly how long it was up for, but I happened to run into the demo. So I gave it a little play, and I quickly realized that it's not for me. I think there's probably an audience that would really like it, but it just happens to not be me. And unfortunately, it seems that that is the case for a lot of the players who were into the previous games. So I think it's having trouble finding its audience. It looks like it's more of a story-driven thing and much more of a casual experience. It's more focused on just a few buttons rather than moving across the whole keyboard and managing the whole restaurant. It's a whole different game. It's a very, very different game. So if you are looking for the experience that I have just described, look into any of the three games that say Cook Serve Delicious. If you were looking for something much more casual that looks like it's more of like a story driven kind of a vibe, you can look into Cook Serve Forever. I do hope that it finds its audience because I'm a huge fan of the series, and that one just happens to not land for me. Let's see. As far as, oh, there's one more thing I wanted to mention, which is that the music is just beyond phenomenal. For me, I am a huge fan of the work of this composer in these games. when I listened to the Cook Serve Delicious 3 soundtrack, I went, okay, how did this even happen? Did somebody just look at the composer and say, you can do anything you want? And then the composer just happened to do exactly just an absolutely perfect job for this soundtrack. Like it feels like he was completely plugged in to everything that this game needed for its soundtrack. Um, but it also feels like, and this is what makes it so interesting, it feels like nobody was reining him in. When I listen to that soundtrack, I feel like that man was just running wild. He does some wild, weird things, and I love it. I listen to that soundtrack regularly. It's so good, and it's kind of comfortable and cozy. I mean, it has those moments of panic in it, but like it's a nice counter to the extreme intense stress of the gameplay. I think I've talked enough about how much I love this game. Let's try to figure out what I can learn from it, what we can learn from it, because every time I'm playing it, I'm too focused on playing it to really try to analyze what's going on, because man, does that game pull all of your attention and just suck you straight into a flow state. So let's look into what it is about this game that makes it so good, and what I can learn from it, cuz it is worth investigating. I think the first question that I really want answered about this game is, why does the core gameplay mechanic work so well? Is this just a matter of extremely well done balance of the game? Is this a matter of just the concept panning out really well? Have they, like, what did they do? You know, what's going on here? Because they've done something very special. And what they've done is they've created this huge menu, this like crazy customizable menu where you can kind of do whatever you want, but you end up having a fun time like the whole time. Is this because there's something about the menu that that kind of leans you towards a balanced selection of food items? Is there a natural inclination towards like, oh well, I want to have some variety in the menu, and somehow that ends up balancing things? I think maybe that's something I can't figure out without like asking questions to the developers directly, which I do not have access to them. Let's see. But the thing that maybe that I can come up with a theory about is the like why the stress feels so good. Like I think a big part of this game is the rhythm of it. There's a sort of a flow that happens. You get rushes of orders. You have to prep a ton of orders really quickly. You have to prep all these custom orders, and then when you get to the spot where the customers are, then you just have to deliver a lot of those custom orders, and then you have a different set of orders that you have to make, and you can rip through those usually a lot quicker, or you're prepared for those already. And then you go back to your travel time and you're prepping for things again, right? And while you're prepping, um the the pivot of the stress between prepping and the moment you arrive is nice. There's a nice ebb and flow of the stress. There's a little bit of a relief, and there's an amount of planning that you have to do in order to make sure that this pans out the way that you want it to. And I think that's a lot of why the core mechanic works so well, is because you recognize how easily you can ruin your own day if you plan the menu, geez, excuse me, if you plan the menu poorly. Um, and I think that's actually a part of the game that I think I have underestimated in the past. I tend to think about just the typing part. I tend to think about just the making of the food itself. But now that I'm talking about it, I do think the planning out the menu is a massive part of the gameplay loop. I think that is very significant in this game. I believe that um it's kind of it's kind of a mechanic that flies under the radar for me, because I look at the foods and I go, yeah, you know what, hot dogs would be fun. Why not? Let's do a little theme, right? Let's do this, that, and the other, right? But really, you are choosing your difficulty, and I think the level of customization for difficulty with the variety of options turns this into a game that is very approachable in terms of difficulty without becoming very easy. And they do also have Zen mode. So like if you want it to be a different experience, you can absolutely turn that on and you can chill a little bit. But the thing that strikes me about this is that how do I put this into words? There's a specific thought that I have right now that I have to really clarify. There is a change in difficulty that is not just a slider. It is a change in difficulty based on how well you've memorized recipes. It is a change in difficulty based on what you're comfortable typing. It's difficulty based on familiarity and complexity rather than scaling enemy health points, right? When you up the difficulty in this game, you're not just making more customers come to you. There are some tweaks to the difficulty like that as well, but I think a lot of what you're doing is not even perceived as changing how hard things are. It's more perceived as, oh, I kind of want this food, or oh, that food's kind of frustrating, so you can balance your frustration. Which I think that feels like a good lesson from this game is allowing the player to customize the difficulty in more unique ways, through more settings, through more changes. And I think other examples of this, what's another example of this? I know Shovel Knight has different characters you can play, and that's a big modification for the difficulty of that game. I'm having a lot of trouble coming up with other examples of this. I'm sure that they are out there, but it is interesting to think about ways to change difficulty that are not just some slider, but are additional abilities, or different sets of abilities, or reduction in your abilities. I think roguelikes probably are more prone to doing this. You can have different character classes, and some are easier than others or better suited for different environments than others. So I like that concept. I'm not sure that I could apply that to my particular game, to my platformer. That's okay. I'm kind of not looking for core changes to it at the moment, but it might be an idea to tuck away for a future game, because I really like that concept. One thing that I found is I'm really not a play games on hard mode kind of a guy. I think a lot of the time, it's because I grew up with JRPGs. I think a lot of the time I put something on hard mode, it just takes longer. Like, it's not harder. It's harder to endure it because it's so much slower, but it's not always harder to play. It doesn't require more skill, it just requires more patience. And I want it to require more skill because I don't have patience for mundane things, right? It's like, oh, I'm attacking 4 times instead of 2 for the entire game. That seems like it's not really an increase in difficulty. Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I realize that this topic can be like a little bit of a thing. And we all know the like difficulty slider. Oh, it's got more health points now. It's harder thing, right? Like, we all know that ideally difficulty means more than just you are punching a giant wall of sponge that never takes any damage, but like the the level of effort that it probably takes to really design around this. Like, I'm thinking about it right now, that it's got to be a lot of effort, but man, the payoff, I think it's a pretty good payoff, because that game is going to be so satisfying to play on different levels. Okay, let's move forward a little bit. Here's a good question. This is a question that I can actually ask myself about this game that I am making. What skills does a player have to learn in order to play my game? Because Cook Serve Delicious has a lot of skills you got to learn to play the game. It's got a lot of memorization. It's got a lot going on in there. There's like typing speed. You got to know where the keys are on your keyboard. So it's just got me thinking, and maybe this is like kind of an accessibility question, but what does a player need to know to play my game? And I've thought about this in terms of level design a couple times. I've thought about like in one of the early levels, I go, oh, people need to know that they can stick to walls in this game. So I force you to stick to a wall, right? I put you in a situation where you're going to end up sticking to a wall no matter what if you're trying to advance. Like it's gonna happen. All right, cool. Now you know you can stick to walls. You have a little moment where you're like, uh-oh, and then you're like, oh wait, no, I can stick to walls. Great, beautiful. Um, so they need to know what the mechanics of the game are. I think that probably applies to I don't know, every game. Like you need to know, oh, this is okay. I was thinking about this a lot while I've been working on this game. I want to show players when you're using mouse and keyboard, I want to show the player these are your button options without telling them what every button does. And I realize this is like kind of a weird thought, but hear me out on this. It's coming from an education perspective. I'm a huge fan, and this is my own particular educational philosophy. I'm a really big fan of having somebody experiment and not just be told what it does. How many times have you opened up the controller settings for a game and just been like, oh God, I don't. There's just so many lines and words. I mean, maybe I'm just like, maybe my brain is just not suited to that. But I look at, oh, it's so much. I can't stand it. Like the worst one for me is the controllers for Red Dead Redemption 2. When I open up that freaking controller setting thing on gamepad, I'm just like, what are you talking about, man? I can't read this. Like I know that it makes sense. I understand that it's a well-designed thing and like I can look through it and whatever, but like can't you just I just want to experiment with these controls. So anyway, the thing I've been thinking about, I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent there. The thing I've been thinking about is how can I just invite the player to experiment with certain keys on their keyboard rather than when it's a gamepad? And I guess the best way is just a little, oh my God, I'm asking a question that already has a solution. I've seen this before so many times. Okay, you just make a little graphic that just shows, it just highlights a few keys and it's got the little letter on them. You just have a little image that says, oh, look, these are the keys. And you don't even need to show them what it does. You can just show them the keys and they'll use them. Like I could just show a full keyboard and it just has certain keys in a different color. And then the player's just going to know, oh, I should try those keys and I'll find out what they do, right? Of course. I guess I needed to state it. I needed to work through it and get there on my own. Um, so that'll help the player learn the things that they need to learn in order to play the game. And then for my particular game, they're also going to need to know some platforming tropes, like falling into the lava kills you, like those are spikes, spikes are bad, like that kind of thing. And that can be communicated through just consequences, right? I'm gonna brag on my game because I got it. I just put out the demo. One of the things that I'm happiest with in this game, and I know it's such a simple thing, like it barely matters, is the speed of reset on levels when you die. I do think there's an element of this that's not perfect, but the moment you die, you just instantly restart at the beginning of the level. And I know that's not like some huge design thing. It's just I'm just glad that works out really well because I hate loading times between levels or between deaths. I really don't like when there's any delay between the moment that you die and the moment that you start back up. So that in my game, there's just a quick death animation and then boom, you're back, like straight back into it. No screen, no nothing. And I'm so happy with that because I die a lot in games and I don't want to I don't want to see the screen. I don't want like a 5 second delay between every death because it takes a lot of time. Okay. Back to my questions. I had one more question based on Cook Serve Delicious 3. What are some atypical ways to add depth to the world? Because this is something that they do very well. They do this interesting world building. In one of the games, they do it through emails. In this game, they do it through like traveling across the country and having a little bit of dialogue. I'm a big fan of adding depth through what is going on in your environment. I'm a big fan of the like, oh, you picked up this, like the Resident Evil thing where you pick something up and read it. I like adding depth in a way that you can ignore it. Adding little secrets that nobody's going to find. But what are atypical ways? What's something that I'm not thinking of? Um, this isn't really atypical, but I think maybe it doesn't come to the forefront of everybody's mind. Some sound design tricks, right? Like you can hint at things through sound design, or you can have non-visual elements that tell a story. So you can have, like, let's say there are pipes creaking in the background, but you can't see them. There's just like some black lines visually or something. Um, and now you know that you're in a place that has pipes, right? That will tell you something about the world. Or you hear something stomping around above you, and it's like, oh, I'm very small, and something is stomping on the floor above me. Stuff like that. Of course, I jump to the sound design stuff because I like music and sound and all that. I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on Cook Serve Delicious 3. I would love to dive even deeper into how they make that core mechanic work so well, but like I would just be throwing a ton of random ideas out there and thoughts, and like I wish I knew more about their development process and how they tested that, because that would be very interesting. Maybe I'll have to look up and see if there's any kind of documentaries. Maybe I don't think NoClip has done anything on them. But I wonder if there might be a documentary or something out there. If anybody knows something like that, about this series in particular, definitely send it to me. But as far as I know, I mean, I haven't actively searched for it, but I think I probably would have run into it if it did exist. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that somebody knows it and has seen it and can send it my way. That would be amazing. Let's talk about my game development really quickly. Obviously, I've already talked about this in the intro, but I have posted the demo of my game. It is in the show notes for this episode, and I'm very happy to have posted it. It has been stressful. it's been it's been a lot because I'm prepping for a vacation right now, and there's just a lot going on. That's just how that works, right? Right before the vacation, you stress yourself out like crazy. Um, so I posted the demo. There's a form. There's a Google form for feedback. Let's talk about the actual development stuff I've done though. I did some. Oh well, I did seamless tile maps. That's what stands out to me right now. I had this issue with the backgrounds where it was very clear where the tiling was, and I learned how to do seamless tile maps. And it turns out there's basically one little button that you click in Sprite that makes it really easy to design a seamless background. And even with the whole brick thing, in one of my earliest episodes, I'm talking about like, oh, I may have picked a bad thing to do for my first tile map because I'm doing bricks. Turns out, like, what, like 3-4 months later, um, I just needed to click one button in the drop down, and suddenly designing a brick background is extremely easy and totally fine. But you know what? I learned a lot in that process about colors and other stuff. To make that tile map look better than it did in the first place, because my first draft of that brick tile map was bad. So that's exciting. I think I already talked in the last episode about the cool new font that I'm using for a lot of like menus and stuff. If I didn't, I'm using a cool new font. It's great. I like it. It is mono-spaced so that it doesn't jitter around all over the place and act really buggy. That's surprisingly important for the timer that I have running. There's a timer, there's a kill counter to kind of encourage like speed running type behavior. I'm excited about it, and I'm really excited to have posted the demo. I think in the next episode, I will talk a little bit more about the process and the pitfalls that I've already run into with this demo. I ran into some stuff very quickly, but we'll save that for the next episode because I am going a little long here. So let's go ahead and get to the sustainability tip for this week. The tip for this week is not in keeping with Cook Serve Delicious 3, because Cook Serve Delicious 3 makes me want to be a perfectionist, and I love that about it. But the tip this week is to drop the perfectionism, to say, hey, forget being perfect. I can just be good. Or, you know what? Better yet, I can be bad. I can do this horribly. And by doing it horribly, I am getting more done than if I sat here trying to be perfect and obsessing over every single detail and actually getting nothing done, or just being completely frozen. I got this. I first learned this lesson when I was in high school, and my buddy and I were trying to write songs together, and we couldn't do it. We just could not get ourselves to write songs. We couldn't write any lyrics because we were too busy being freaked out about it. And eventually we were like, oh, what was it? Somebody had said something about this. Oh, we got to try to make something poorly. We need to make a bad version of this first. We need to do this poorly. And we tried it. And inevitably what you end up doing is you make something bad, right? And then you accidentally find a good thing within the bad thing. And you start growing that. And then before you know it, you're drafting. If I didn't embrace this philosophy, I would have never started making this podcast. And this podcast is a significant thing to me that I gain a lot of value out of. So I'm really glad that I didn't try to do this podcast perfectly from the beginning. Additionally, I'm really glad that I didn't try to design my game perfectly from the beginning. And I know that it's flawed. I know there's going to be things that are mistakes, so to speak. I know there's going to be things that I wish were different. There's going to be all this stuff. But if I focused on getting it perfect to begin with, I would never have made a game at all, right? So you gotta, this is so important to me for my particular mindset. Dropping the perfectionism is huge. And there's a quote. This is the cheesiest quote in my life. I got this from a drum instructor, I think, when I was in high school. He wasn't even one of my teachers, but he was one of the teachers for the marching band. And he would say, there's no such thing as perfect, but the spectrum of excellence is infinite. And I'm just going to add something onto that, because that makes it feel like you have to strive for being really, really excellent all the time. But the spectrum is infinite, which means that it starts infinitely low, right? You can start anywhere and get towards the top of that spectrum of excellence. You can start from a real bad place and work your way up. And in fact, if that's where you're at, that's where you have to start. That's how I feel about it. That's all I've got to say about it. Let's end the episode here. There are going to be a couple more episodes that I'm going to be recording tomorrow. It's little insider tip. It's 1:30 in the morning right now. Whoops. I'm going to be doing some late night recordings over the next couple days, to make sure that these episodes get out weekly while I'm on my vacation. So you can expect to still get episodes while I'm on vacation. Having said that, I am going to go to bed, and I would encourage you to have a fantastic week, to enjoy whatever it is that you are creating, if you're creating something, or whatever it is that you're consuming, if you're just playing some great games or listening to some great music or what have you. Have a great week. I will talk to you next time. And don't try to be perfect. Just be great. Or just be bad, and you'll get great. Have a good week. See you.